you. All right, welcome to our share out session. I'm going to open up my screen so hopefully that you can see that. So just a quick introduction, and bear with us as we kind of work on our technical issues as we go along as well. My name is Annalise Rivas. I'm an assistant professor of the practice at Gustavus Adolphus College in Minnesota. And I'm very pleased to welcome you today to our panel entitled appropriately Minnesota Nice, Inclusive Practices in Russian Language Classrooms in a State Known for Kindness. So I'm delighted to welcome some colleagues from other Russian programs across Minnesota. Our panel today is going to focus on some different approaches that we've used in our classrooms in order to increase inclusivity and diversify some of our offerings within our Russian classrooms here in Minnesota. This has especially been designed as we, and I'm sure that many of you out there encountered the same thing, have encountered students who are maybe multilingual learners or first-generation learners, or maybe just have had different experiences throughout their high school or earlier schooling years in terms of learning how to learn and learning what the appropriate ways and expected ways of engaging with college materials might be. So we're going to take a look today at 5 different approaches and some different ideas for ways to enhance equity and accessibility for our students as we encounter them in our classrooms. All right, so each presenter will introduce the next person as we go along. So I will just start us out as we go along for our next. If I can get my slides to work, that would be fun. All right, so presenting for you today, again, I'm Annalise Rivas. We have representatives also from St. Olaf, from Carleton, from Macalester, and from the University of Minnesota. And here's just a little brief outline of what we will each be presenting on today. We're going to sort of start with day 1 of class, and I'll be talking about unhiding classroom expectations. And then we're going to dive into some other practical activities that you can do throughout the semester or throughout the year and at different proficiency levels. All right, so I'm again focusing on what I've encountered in my program and just a little bit of background information about that. So I teach all levels of Russian here at Gustavus Adolphus College and am the only Russian language teacher here at the school. So when students start learning Russian at Gustavus, they very quickly learn that if they're going to continue, they will be studying with me for as many years as they choose to continue studying Russian. What I've taken away from that experience for my responsibilities to them is that we really need a firm foundation for our community norms in our Russian classes, because potentially students are going to be in those communities for up to 8 semesters of class together. So potentially a class their entire undergraduate career. And so oftentimes, especially because I teach early morning classes, students who are coming in as first-year students, their Russian language class, their first-year Russian class, is their first class on the first day of their first year of college. And so for many of them, they are ready to learn what that means. What does being in college mean, and what are the expectations? And so I've based some of my first day of class activities on the ideas presented in the Inclusive Teaching book by Hogan and Sathi about assumptions that we as instructors cannot assume that students know how to succeed in our courses or in college in general if we don't tell them what that looks like. So being explicit with our expectations. And so, again, many of our students here at Gustavus come in, or maybe not many, but several of our students come in with either no foreign language experience or potentially a foreign language classroom experience in high school that was not rewarding for them, or that they've decided they want to try something different than what they experienced in high school and have therefore chosen Russian. And conversely, those who have succeeded in foreign language in high school may have unreasonable expectations for their Russian language learning, especially if they are coming in with a language that is more similar to their native language. I also have a good number of multi-language learners who are adjusting to a new form of classroom environment, whether that be as international students or students from additional backgrounds. And so I have externalized some of our expectations for the program in a presentation that I just start class with called How to Rock Russian, which is just a guide for a first year experience at Gustavus in their Russian language studies. And one of the things that I have striven to do as a non-native speaker of Russian in my classrooms is to make clear that making mistakes is a part of learning and is also a part of just being a carrier of a language that is not something that you grew up speaking. So I'm very upfront with them, say, I will make mistakes, you will make mistakes, we're going to celebrate them, we're not going to hide them, and talking about how every person in our classroom is coming with a different experience. Additionally, during this time, I work hard to help our students set their own community norms and practice the pacing of our class and how to approach our time together. And also normalizing asking for help, going to tutoring, asking questions about how to use our language management, our learning management system. We use Moodle, and many students are unfamiliar with that coming into college. And acknowledging that asking for and getting help is a natural and rewarded part of learning. So I kind of go through the basics of, what do they need for the course? When does the course meet? Where do they go for the course? And to share a little bit about why they are there. And really the main drive of this portion of class is to provide them an actual visual roadmap of how to approach their language studies. So I give them this sort of infographic about whether they're doing individual work, class work, shared work, and when they need to be making decisions in their own learning, so that I am enabling students to reflect on and assess their own abilities at intermediary stages and not just at the exam, right? Because so many students feel that the exam is, or any kind of assessment is stressful, and they are unsure how prepared they are. So I've created this as a way to help them take ownership for their own proficiency checks. So we use the actual can-do statements as weekly checks, sometimes with a partner, sometimes individually. And in partner work, I've discovered that part of creating this inclusive environment and acknowledging the differences among students is that I do assign partners, especially in the first year classes, so that occasionally they are working with a partner who struggles on the same things that they struggle on, so that they can have a shared experience about, wow, this is hard and it's not just me that doesn't understand it. And sometimes I pair them with someone who has mastered the thing that they're struggling with, so that they can start to see that there are not good students and bad students, but just students who have various strengths and weaknesses, and that we can celebrate all of those things. So I invite you to take this idea forward into your own classes and just help our students realize what it is that we expect from them. So on that note, I am thrilled to introduce my colleague at St. Olaf, Giulia Dossi, who will be presenting on her take on the prepositional Olympics, or how to use the textbook. So Giulia, over to you.
Thank you so much, Annalise. So maybe I'll just ask you slide one just to move things along. Great. So thank you so much. This is really a great segue for me. So what I am going to talk about today is about a month and a half in. So after hopefully you've done already this great work. Oops, I thought I started a 5-minute timer. There we go. So slide, please. I have to preface by saying that I'm not a native of Minnesota. I am actually Italian. Slide, please, or click. And we can be nice, but we aren't necessarily Minnesota nice. So not, I didn't grow up with this culture. Slide. And I was trained by old school Russian teachers. Slide. Um, I'll give you a second to read the joke. Um, and slide, please. So definitely not Minnesota nice. And I had done my homework. I've always been a good student. So I had read and discussed the inclusivity practices, and I thought I was ready. But I had taught beginning Russian a few times. Several times. I had taught this class before. Slide, please. But then I came to St. Olaf, slide. And I encounter for the first time diversity in real life, or more than I had ever encountered before. And I realized that I wasn't doing nearly enough of the unhiding the curriculum as I thought I was doing. So it was really a learning curve for me. So you see, St. Olaf has diversity, especially as far as first generation college students, international students, and students that, like Annalise was saying, might have all sorts of different experiences in high school. And with foreign language learning, especially. And so, slide, please. I realized that one of the things that was not working is a lot of them didn't really know how to work with the textbook. So I gave them this book. I said, this is what we're using. I will stay very close in everything I explain in class, so you can go back and find it. But they really needed more support in figuring out how to use this tool. That is like a fundamental tool, right? To succeed in the class. And so, among more kind of boring things that we did, but very important, like literally explaining how it works, how the workbook references back to a grammatical point in the textbook, etc. I also did one fun activity that I want to talk about today, specifically on how to approach a textbook, kind of demystifying it, making it more fun, making it more accessible. Slide, please. And so, oh, and again. So here comes Propositional Olympics, or how to use the textbook. Slide. So what I did is in phase one, I gave students this sheet where they use their textbook to determine the correct prepositional endings and prepare a number of questions. So this doesn't have a timed component. They have time to go back and kind of interpret all these tables that the textbook is full of, and they can help each other out and collaborate and form these questions. Slide. And then phase two, they receive their competition sheets and the competition begins. Slide. So this is a timed part. So there's some students that sit and answer the questions, and the other side of the table, the students move. It's kind of like a speed dating setup. So one side of the table moves and the other side stays still. And the moving student asks the question they prepared in phase one. Например, о какой квартире ты говоришь? And the student that answers has 1 minute to go to the textbook, navigate the chart, and write in the correct answer. Slide. So when the student who sit are filled out their competition sheets, their two groups switch, so everybody participates in the competition. Slide. Phase three, the instructor corrects the competition sheets. The students with the least amount of mistakes win first, second, and third prize, and each prize comes with a cookie. Now I think that's Minnesota nice. But so this is just kind of like a fun way to, again, it's not about having the endings memorized, being perfect at grammar, but it's about how do I go back and figure out where to find the information that I need. So yeah, That's it for me. Just a fun activity. And now I pass it over to my colleague across the river at Carleton College, Laura Goering, who's going to talk about inclusion through personalization.
Hello, thanks, Giulia. So I, like my colleagues, teach Russian 101 almost every year. And for many of them, it's their first college class. And so one of the major challenges is retention in the first few weeks, because especially at Carleton, we have 10-week trimesters. The pace is very quick and students can get scared very easily. So one of the typical ways that we all use to get students to communicate actively is to get them to talk about themselves. Slide, please. Their family, where they're from, what their parents do. But I have become increasingly aware that for some students, this is actually quite uncomfortable. I've had students who recently lost a parent. I had a student whose family was undocumented. I had a student whose father was incarcerated. Students from different socioeconomic backgrounds may feel uncomfortable talking about their family, where they live, or their parents' jobs or education. And this actually leads to quite a bit of embarrassment or anxiety and can really interfere with their learning and raise their affective filters. So I'm going to show you a fun activity that helps make all students feel included without touching on anything that might cause them anxiety. This particular version is designed to practice the constructions "нет" and "не было" and to review possessive pronouns, but it can easily be adapted for other uses. So it starts with the photo of a student. Slide, please. Oops, sorry, next one. Popping up on the screen in the role of Tsar. So this is a photo from our textbook, but I would use photos from the directory of our actual students. And then I would take everything in my basket of props, click please, and give it to that student. And then we start to play with whose things are these, click. Андрюша, чья это вода? Моя. Чьи это яйца? Мои. And then the other students all get involved as well. Скажи, пожалуйста, это мое пиво? Конечно, нет, пиво мое. Все здесь мое, я царь. It doesn't matter who the student is. They might be shy, whatever. They always love doing this. Slide, please. We also use one of my favorite props, click. And we will talk about that. Slide. Андрюшка, скажите, пожалуйста, вирус тоже ваш? Конечно, нет, вирус ваш. And the virus ends up invariably flying around the room. We move on to talking about what the Tsar had to practice the construction было, у нашего царя Андрюши было все, slide, and practicing with various things. And here, these are photos from around our campus that happen to be the vocabulary from this chapter. Что у него было озеро, у него был фонтан, and so forth. Go on. But then there's a revolution. The Tsar gets toppled, next slide, and loses everything. And then we can move on, next slide, to practice not having those things. So we go back to the same things on the next slide, and these come one by one. У него не было ни машины, ни фонтана, ни озера, and so forth. If we keep going, next slide, we can end up also having a toppled tsaritsa. And then we can get to practice some of the feminine endings as well. If we go on, we might circle back then to now we own everything and we can practice the possessive pronoun наш. Next slide. Это Андрюшины пельмени. Нет, это наши пельмени. Это Кларина рыба. Нет, it's all ours. But the virus, of course, это ваш вирус. Нет, это не наш вирус. Это вирус царя и царицы. So needless to say, this is not an authentic activity, but the students love it. I have never had a reluctant Tsar. They really get into the role. And as I said, this can be adapted to any grammar you want. And I hope you find it a useful addition to your inclusivity toolbox. And with that, I'm going to pass it along to my colleague, Tamara Schmidt-Pauli of Macalester College. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us. I work as a Russian language instructor at Macalester College, and I have experience teaching all various levels of Russian, but it varies from one year to another. However, the thing that stays and is essential to my teaching is using games and any kind of activities that are not actual games, but may seem or be presented to students as games. So the subject is gamification of learning across proficiency levels. Next slide. And I'm going to talk with you what it does. So you could see that games promote active participation, cultural understanding, sense of community, collaboration. They support also individual learner needs and linguistic competence. Next slide, please. So in the class, every language learner or every language student is not just a student, they're a player. You could see a little photograph there. So I took a picture of a little hachlama bowl with dice, and this is an essential part of my classroom. I actually have a few of those bowls and sets of dices. And my case study one is how can you use dice to ignite speaking skills. So I suggest the activity where you decide either you roll one die or two dice. So let's say you roll die one and it could equal to a topic. So you assign number one could be погода, два семья, три hobby, и так далее. So you decide. And then die two, you could play with just die one, or you can add die two where you can add a social context. For example, you're talking to a teacher or to a friend, to a stranger, and so on. You could ask them, what each number equals to, maybe use a comparative, use future tense, include adjectives. So then students create a short dialogue based on the dice roll combination. Next slide, please. What other activities can you do with dice? You could definitely practice vocabulary. So when they roll a die, they say a word from a specific category, or you could just practice one category and then how many words do they say when they roll a die. You could do grammar practice. So you roll to determine the pronoun, then you conjugate the given verb. Now that takes a little bit of time. So in most cases, you probably want to have just one die and you assign which verb it is. And then once they roll it, they do the entire conjugation. But if they need a little break and like rolling dice, then certainly you can do both. Or you could practice different conversation prompts or work on word phrase function. So what do they need to do with the words? They need to translate it if they roll one, if they roll two, use in a sentence, act it out, draw it. This activity works very well at all different levels, and they love it. By now, they actually look forward to using dice in our classroom. Next slide, please. Can you adapt this for different proficiency levels? Like I've said, I've taught all different levels, and absolutely you can do that. So for beginner, it's very simple. So you use visuals, flashcards, or word banks, and then they just say a single word from a chosen category. That's how the game goes. At a higher level, let's say intermediate or just higher level, so that can go now to using short phrases or practicing short phrases, sentences in a context. And then the advanced one is when we are including idiomatic usage, when they need to find or practice some complex or culturally relevant context. Next slide, please. So that was how we use with vocab. With grammar, I already covered a little bit about conjugation. If you look down a little lower on the slide, you could also use it to practice prepositions and cases. So when you really, dice can be used to practice any topic in Russian language. Next slide, please. So you could see further down how you could use dice practicing at a higher level. So when you have pronouns, but then you include tense and aspects, or maybe you use them to practice case and structures and ask them to already use either any cases or accusative genitive, your choice. Example, you roll 4, 2, 2, and then it shows you that you roll the pronoun мы to use in the past tense, and then you need to include genitive in your sentence. And then they come up with a sentence, either у нас не было машины, or maybe something more advanced. Когда мы читали статью, мы поняли, что у нас нет нужной информации. Next slide, please. And with that, I'm wrapping up the ideas that you could take away from this lecture and start using in your classroom right away, and pass it on to my colleague at the University of Minnesota, Irina Zaykovskaya. Welcome.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for the introduction. Can you move the slide, please? Yeah, so I'm Irina and I work at the University of Minnesota. I work in two departments. In one of them, I teach Russian, and in another, I teach courses in sociolinguistics because my background is in sociolinguistics and second language studies. So I'm kind of using my transdisciplinary background to promote translanguaging in the classroom. I want my students to bring their whole linguistic selves to the classroom, and I'm using my transdisciplinary background to do that. Move the slide, please. So the term translanguaging may or may not be familiar to you. Most of you are probably familiar with the term code switching. They might refer to the same phenomenon, but they don't have to. Usually we use the term translanguaging to talk about any type of language use, not limited to speaking, involving more than one language, without necessarily being fluent in all languages involved, which is the typical situation with code switching, at least as it is described in linguistics literature. There is also a concept of pedagogical translanguaging. That is a theoretical and instructional approach that aims at improving language and content competences in school context by using resources from the learner's whole linguistic repertoire. Again, that came out not out of language classrooms. It started to be used, and it appeared first in content classrooms and is frequently used in K through 12 classrooms in the United States and probably in some other countries as well. However, recently there have been more calls for replacing pedagogical translanguaging as a specific technique with translanguaging pedagogy, meaning the whole approach of embracing the increasingly multilingual presence in our classrooms and the multilingual composition of our classrooms. Slide, please. What does it look like in class? There is a common fear or myth that translanguaging means using L1 in the classroom, which in turn takes away time from the target language, which is considered to be the goal. However, the reality is that translanguaging is actually an authentic practice in many communities. That includes the countries that used to be part of the USSR. We just had a brilliant plenary on that topic specifically. Or in immigrant communities like in the United States. So if you're teaching here and you're working with the community members will be using more than one language in their repertoire. There are added bonuses in the classroom in that heritage learner identities are validated because those practices would be likely very common in their families. And for non-heritage learners, especially beginners, it gives an opportunity to still participate in a meaningful conversation, even when their Russian linguistic resources are not yet enough to do so. Of course, it does not mean that there couldn't be and shouldn't be clear guidelines. There should be clear guidelines for authentic situations where only Russian must be used. That would include formal writing, certain genres of text, speaking to monolinguals, or obviously tests and quizzes. Slide, please. How many languages can be used? Again, another fear is that if the teacher and all students do not have 100% overlap in the languages available to them, then translanguaging is not going to be effective or can even be disruptive. But the reality is that we already have a kind of built-in imbalance in various ways. It can be because we have both heritage and non-heritage speakers of Russian and learners of Russian. We may have speakers of other Slavic versus non-Slavic languages. We may have native and non-native speakers of the dominant language of the environment, the language we are using as kind of the language through which the instruction is taking place. And what allowing translanguaging does is it leads to better balance in resources that can be used for linguistic analysis. And my thing is specifically using multiple languages for linguistic analysis in the classroom. Of course, for that to work, there needs to be a consistent pattern of engaging students' various linguistic resources. So my goal is to prevent kind of the compartmentalization of linguistic resources, meaning that they come to the Russian classroom and they can only use Russian or maybe English, as this is the language of the textbook and our environment, and they separate their Spanish-speaking self, their French-speaking self, their German-speaking self from that, or any other languages they're familiar with. Slide, please. I have a couple of examples to show how that might work. So, for example, during the discussion of areas of study, a student asks, how do I say I study law? Now, as a teacher, we have different options. I can say prava. That word is short. That's not particularly difficult to pronounce. It's Slavic in origin. Perfect. And people usually don't go with jurisprudenция because the word is longer, maybe difficult to pronounce, if we assume learners to be monolingual in English. That's to say. However, if I found that if I offer both and encourage students to think if they know any cognates, that may work better because Prava has cognates in other Slavic languages. Jurisprudencia, on the other hand, has cognates in Latin, Spanish, and Italian. And students with that background, not necessarily natively, right, but in different ways, may find it useful, and they may even discover a new English word for them. Associations help learn the word, and students end up with at least one of those retained and in their repertoire. Slide, please. Another example is expressing liking with dative and nравится. The usual options are presenting and explaining the structure, or what I like doing, using some grammatical analysis and pattern discovery activity. But I enhance that activity by, for example, asking students if they have any knowledge of Spanish or Italian, and if they do, I put them together to complete the activity. Even without explicit instructions, they are alerted to the fact that their knowledge is somehow relevant, and they're going to be thinking about that. And chances are that they're going to discover the similarity to similar structures in Spanish or Italian. They're going to process it earlier, and what I find happens next is that they become the ambassadors of the structure in the classroom, and they help their peers and remind their peers, how it works, and that gives them a confidence boost as well. Slide, please. And just as a bonus thing, I mentioned that translanguaging is an authentic situation. So, for example, there is a popular meme, "Давай, до свидания," featuring frequently used colloquial "goodbye, давай," which many of us introduce in class because that's what people say. What not everyone knows is that the origin of this meme is in the 2011 improv performance in rural Azerbaijan in actually Azerbaijani, Talish, and Russian languages. That's an absolutely phenomenal audio that, yeah, if you can play for a couple minutes, that's going to be fun.
Evet,
Oh,
diye.
okay.
Zabıca gazete yuvarlatmadı. O değil. Onu diye. Ayrı bir tane, teze bir tane. TikTok такой, давай, до свидания. 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 Ты кто такой, давай, до свидания. Ты кто такой, Гизин такой, ведь надо осторожно. Мастера есть свой таможный. Гизин такой, ведь надо осторожный. Стара есть наш таможный. Я знаю по-русски, как положено. Давай, иди гуляй, до свидания.
And that continues, it continues to be moving from one language to another. And that is an actually authentic practice that was never intended to go viral on the Russian internet, but it did, and it contributed a very well-known meme here. Yeah, thank you.
All right, at this point, we'll open it up for some questions. Thank you to everyone who presented. We'll leave our pictures up here so that you can see maybe who you would like to direct any questions to. And I will invite you to just, I think there's few enough of us here. So if you have a question, just go ahead and unmute and ask.
As long as there are no, oh, yes, please
I have
go
a
ahead
question
with the
for
question.
Tamara. Tamara, how often
Yeah.
do you use your dice exercises, seeing that you could use them every day for everything?
I use them very often. So I use them every week for sure, but we also play various games on Fridays. So they just include the all different kinds of authentic games. Like yesterday we did the game. Oh, I don't have it alone. We have it's kind of a trivia, but it's separate cards, and I ordered it from Russia, so it's very recent. And dice, yeah, I use at least once a week, maybe more. I had a comment to Irina. I loved that video. That's the first time I see it, but I think this would be a terrific way to teach it. Like it gets into the brain and gets stuck. Like you'll walk away from the class singing that for the rest of the week.
That's what happens. Yes, they immediately started using that. Yes, I have students. They do that. that really works quickly.
Circling back to dice, we just did the activity where I assigned which function it is. Like I had this translate the word, or you use it in a phrase. And then one of them says, you choose what to do. And students love when they get their own choice.
I have a question for Annalise, one for Tamara, one for Irina. I guess I'll start with Annalise because you went first. What can you say again? What kind of weekly check-ins do you do with your students? So that's not all. I mean, we also do very like frequent tests, right? And I say this is not for you guys to get stressed, but it's so that like things don't accumulate, right? If we test often, then every individual test is not as important, right? You can do poorly on one, there's enough of them that it doesn't matter. But it would be nice to introduce something else too.
So what we do for our weekly check-ins is on the schedule for each week, I have a list of can-do statements that they need to, that I expect that if they've acquired all of the material that we cover or that we work with during that week, that by the end of the week, I give them three goals for each week that they can do by the end of the semester from the actual can-do statements, and then a bonus goal so that if there are students who are like, oh, I got this, I can push them into the, yeah, but can you take it up to this next level? And so at the end of each week, they have right on their schedule a way to check off and write an example of a sentence that they can create or that they know, or they can tell sometimes we do oral check-ins before oral proficiency tests. And so sometimes I have them just tell your partner the thing that you can do according to this proficiency. Sometimes I have them write it out for me. Sometimes I have them write it out and we like on a scrap of paper and we put them all together and we lift one out and say, which goal does this accomplish, right? So that they're hearing each other's and then also being able to identify, okay, does this really demonstrate that, or is this something different? So that's kind of how we work with the can do things, and that's just kind of a kind of an exit ticket on the end of the day, on the end of the week, on Fridays.
That's great.
It doesn't single out any student necessarily, but it gives them all a chance to show what they've gained and how they learn.
And zero stakes, right? Not
Right.
it's not
Yeah,
graded, it's not,
yeah. And it helps them know too, since they know that they're at a decision point, right, at the end of the week, according to that infographic, right? That's their decision point. If they struggle to do that in class on Friday, then they know that Sunday night tutoring is maybe for them.
Yeah, great. And my question for Tamara is like, especially for beginner, I feel like at higher proficiencies, you have less of like, oh my gosh, I need to like cover these topics by the end of the year, right? Like when you get to intermediate and advanced is more flexible in my experience as a teacher, but especially in beginner Russian, I struggle with like, okay, we're starting in September, we're finishing in May, and I need to get through X. So how do you find time? Like I want to do more, but I'm just like so bound to just like the grammar, I feel like, you know? So,
I think that was like a personal challenge for me for many years with everything that I did. You know that I ran camp. I overprogrammed it so much that I have kids who ask, "Can we have some free time?" Or because there was not a single moment for them to even breathe. Like everything is fine. I'm having too many ideas. We have too short of a time, or
yeah.
we have large curriculum to fit in. And then at some point, I don't know what flipped it, but I realized it is not about the amount of information that we feed to them. It's what they take away. So, and I feel like spending, let's say, 5 minutes on a game or practicing it via the game creates this kind of relaxed, positive atmosphere. Everyone is looking forward to it. That I feel that even if we spend less time actually drilling grammar, they'll walk away with like the retention will be higher because of their positive relations. They will like it. They will build relations between each other. So there's so much more benefit to it. It's about priorities, like in
Yeah.
life, the same thing. I think you just choose where you want to spend more time. Maybe we're lucky because I'm not, even with beginner, I'm not I have a goal where we need to be at the end of the year, but I know that if we're not there, then in intermediate, we can catch up with this or that chapter.
Right.
So there is some flexibility, and our department is great working with each other. Like, okay, when I pass my intermediate after the first semester, I pass them on to a different instructor, to our chair. And I told her that's what we were able to do. And we all have the same attitude. We want them
Yeah.
to enjoy, we want them to learn, we want them to build a strong relationship with Russian language for the entire life, not just with this course. But I hear you, how there's little time. I just say, they're never perfect. And I'm thinking, okay, they mastered the cases and now they'll do everything correct. We did it so many times in games, not in games and drills, and they still all make mistakes.
Yeah.
So I feel like 5 minutes here and there is not gonna break it.
Speaking of not having enough time, I know we are officially meant to end in about 4 minutes. So, Catherine, it looked like maybe you had a question or a comment that you would like to share.
Yeah, I just wanted to thank all of you for offering so many practical things. Like Tamara, I've used dice, but it hadn't occurred to me to go beyond what I was doing, which is basically creating sentences with pronouns and verbs. So I appreciate those extra ideas. And Annalise, just setting up the class from the beginning with clear expectations. I think that's so valuable. There was one thing I don't know when it was, a couple years ago in an ACTR webinar or something, they talked about doing a syllabus as like an infographic. And I think that that could tie in really well to the kinds of ways you are introducing how to be a student. You're teaching them autonomy and how to think about their learning. And as a high school Russian teacher, I can tell you that their brains are still developing. Like sometimes as middle schoolers, they seem to be able to organize themselves better than they can as juniors. So I think just reviewing that when they get to college is so valuable. And yeah, thank you, everyone. Sorry for a day, fantastic. And translanguaging. I have some ELL learners in my classes now, and just figuring out how to work with them. I think, well, just stay in the target language as much as possible, but that's not necessarily helping them. So this idea of translanguaging sort of bridges that gap, I think.
They're coming with
And
assets. They are coming with huge assets that are different than the assets that your native English speakers are coming with. And when they feel that, they also kind of open up more. And if they are, especially if they are emergent bilingual, so Judith Kroll talked about yesterday, that changes your brain fundamentally and it's working differently. And they are working differently than their initially monolingual English peers. So, all
right.
just thank you.
I bet we have time for maybe one more question. If there's any questions from our audience, and I think we could probably stay on an extra few minutes if people wish, as there isn't something directly additional scheduled at the hour, but I know that there's also a chance to visit some other panels, so feel free to go when you need to go. But I at least can stick around for a little while. Hopefully some other panelists can as well. But thank you all for being here. Thank you to ACTR for providing this format to share some practical ideas. I think that's really helpful as well.
Giulia, you had a question for me?
Yes, I didn't want to take up the time for the audience, but if there's no one else, yeah, like I guess my question is, so you obviously have this amazing background, right? And it's interdisciplinary or transdisciplinary, right? But how can someone who doesn't have that background, what would you recommend? Like, I might not know as many examples, like source it from the students or
Yes, that's the because again, my background is in linguistics, I'm not a polyglot. I don't
yeah.
speak many languages. I mean, for example, I speak some Italian. I have some knowledge of German, like, but I definitely don't have knowledge of all the languages that students are bringing in. So here, this is kind of this trust and opening and trusting the students to bring in ideas, right? So I set the tone by making parallels to and kind of consistently making parallels to the languages I know. And I generally kind of I mean, we all have kind of each of us has our thing, right? So I know some of my colleagues sing songs with students, right?
Yeah.
And students love that and they do. I don't, like, I'm not a singer. I don't enjoy that. And I don't think that's a bad thing necessarily. So if my thing is actually kind of analysis, linguistic analysis, and working on that. And that is also a thing that students come to like and enjoy if you do it consistently. So a week ago, we were practicing the difference between to and boots with the fourth semester class, and I found two students started betting on answers, and $1 exchanged hands
That's
because they got so like deep into discussing why you would do that. And to me that's rewarding to see kind of this level of engagement with grammar, right? So with trying to understand why we're doing this and not that. And kind of this starts with me pointing out sometimes etymology of words, right? So how it came to be, and that they find it interesting, right? They find it fun, right? So when you trace it to, I mean, the easiest thing obviously is cognates with English. We all do that. But you do cognates with other languages, and sometimes they may not know those languages, but you show, well, it's not unique, right? So there is parallel, there is system to this madness, and if you do it over time, they start joining in, and they start bringing in things you have never known because I don't speak those languages, and sometimes, I mean, cognates work with the European languages, with, for example, Chinese or Japanese or Korean. You don't have usually a lot of cognates, but you may have some parallels in grammar or in some understanding of animacy or some other things. And that's what students bring. I have no idea, but they kind of are used to discovering that, and then they tell everybody else, and that helps everyone.
yeah. And
So
I was
my
also
goal
thinking,
is the culture of doing that, and then it's on students to kind of bring their assets.
and I was also thinking about what you said about the difference between code switching and translanguaging, and like you don't need to be bilingual. And it brought me back to something that Annalise said about this kind of failed learning experiences that they had in high school. That would be a nice way to like recycle the 2 years of French that they did and hated, right? So it kind of like a nice way to show like, hey, it wasn't all for nothing. Now you can still like get something out of this maybe not so good experience. So,
Yeah, as a Spanish speaker as well, when we're learning the alphabet, I rely heavily on that because so many students have taken Spanish at some point in their language careers. And I say, I grew up having to do Spanish phonetics, and I didn't realize that it was going to help me with Russian until I, got to high school, and everybody was like, "Oh, you speak Spanish? You can do Russian so easily." And it was so, bringing those experiences into the classroom, and yeah, bringing multiple languages and saying, no, your past experiences have prepared you for this, whether you meant them to or not, right? Like and that does tie in again with so many of those inclusive strategies about being your whole self in the classroom, right? Like we as instructors and our students bringing their whole experience and their whole person to the classroom, and validating those whether they're linguistic experiences or life experiences, and just saying, yes, no, you matter, and your experiences matter in this space. I think that's really great. Any other questions or comments from our panelists or participants?
I was just going to add that translanguaging actually can work in classes in translation as well. I'm teaching the Brothers Karamazov right now, and I have a student who's Turkish who immediately knew that Kara was Black. But I learned just yesterday from a Chinese student that the word for mental illness in Chinese also comes from the word for soul, which she thought was just really cool.
Yeah.
Right. In that case, Igor, I don't know if I have the ability to stop the recording or if just you do.
Yes, I can stop the recording now.
Great. Thank you so much. And thank you for being here. Thank you, Irina, also for joining us. And hopefully this has been helpful for everybody.